How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And what we're going to talk about today is the idea of competitiveness. And what do you need to do to be competitive, and what do you need to do to win? But most importantly, what do you need to ask yourself from a question standpoint to change your mentality around being competitive and winning? Because I think the most important part is that we often aren't asking ourselves the right questions around the situation. We often are asking ourselves questions that are beneath what it's going to take to be successful in the situation. And as a result, it's going to make ourselves a lot less likely that we can be successful in the actual situation that we're dealing with. So what I'm talking about is that you are not competitive, and I love it. And what I mean by that is that many of you are not going to be competitive in the world that we're getting ready to go into. Many people are struggling to be competitive in this current time that we're currently in, right? So we're not even talking about 10, 15, 20 years from now. What I'm talking about is many people are struggling to be competitive in the current time we're in, and they're also going to struggle to be competitive in the future. And a really good analogy was that when I was in college, I had a professor tell me the way this particular college is set up, if you get out of algebra with a C, you're going to fail calculus. Because it's the way this college is set up, the fact that you barely got out of algebra with a passing grade means that when we come at you with higher level material, you're going to fail. So he says the best way to make sure that you're successful when you take calculus is to try to get the best grade you can get in algebra. So when we take you into higher level situations, you don't struggle. Because often what happened is that you'll struggle to get through one level, you'll get through the next level barely. And then when you get there, you'll get creamed because why? You struggled to get past the first level of the game. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about. You're not competitive, and I love it. Now, why do I love it? It's because you're not going to be my opposition. The fact that you're not going to be in this particular environment, you're not even going to have the opportunity to compete because you're not going to be able to, means that what? It's more likely that me and my group can win. So what is some of the game theory and the scenarios that are kind of based around this particular idea to where people realize the best way for me to win is to make sure that you're not competitive, not to ever have to compete with you. So if I can make sure that you don't even show up in the arena to compete, I win. Because why? You're not even here to compete. And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. And I'm not trying to boil it down to these colloquialism games like I want a seat at the table. If you have a seat at the table, but you can't compete, it doesn't matter that you have a seat at the table. The question is, how come you're not able to be competitive in these environments? And then once we get past that, you're not in a position to win. So that's what we're going to talk about, right? So we're going to break it down relatively quickly. Now, this show is sponsored by www.thehighestpaid.online. And this particular program is for people that are making a certain amount of money, but they don't like what they make. They're worried about the fact that the cost of inflation keeps going up, and how are they going to be able to maintain that? And they don't like the fact that they got to take a lot of time away from their family to make the money that they make. We figured out how to solve this particular problem by teaching people how to successfully navigate the options market. But this is a program for people that want to apply themselves. They don't have an issue of being competitive. They don't have an issue of putting themselves in a position where they can win and somebody else is going to lose. And they're willing to be diligent and persistent, right? So it's something that if you fit those particular, I would call key attributes or characteristics, I would encourage you to look into it. We've had a lot of success in doing that, talking about what we're getting ready to talk about in this particular video, right? So really it's about you really changing how you see the world if possible. And often also understanding that many people psychologically and intellectually, they can't change the way they see things. And there's nothing you can do about that. And you can't help those people by staying with them where you're at. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. The way you help people that can't do better for themselves is you do better and then go back and help those folks. You don't help them by staying with them, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, right? So this is what we're going to talk about. Let me go ahead and break it down real quick. So I told you last week this story about I was talking to somebody, right? It's a person that's married and they got children. And they were telling me that they already are homeowners, so they're paying a mortgage. They're empty nesters now, kids in school. And they were telling me that I'm looking at buying properties for each one of the children. So the biggest reason was that they were telling me all these stories about how, you know, when the person passes away, the parents, and they got the one house with multiple children, the children often fight over the house. So they were telling me the story about this family that they knew. The parents passed away. One of the sons took over the house. He was paying the mortgage. And now the other two sons, it was three sons, they want to sell the house and just get the money. And the guy that's living in it is like, well, if we're going to sell it, even though he doesn't really agree with it, y'all need to compensate me for all the money I put into this house over the course of these years. So what they're trying to avoid on one situation is that the children fighting over the one house that they can get from the parents, right? The next thing they're trying to make sure is that the children have a larger estate from the parents. Because let me tell you something. If they get a house now under these rates, even if they pass away and the house isn't fully paid for, it's going to be cheaper than what the children will have to pay for a house in 10 years. So I'm going to repeat myself. If they buy a house now under these interest rates and they get that locked in, okay? When the children, their children get ready to buy a house in 10 years, the cost of homes and the rate, right, the whole deal will be better than what the children are able to get in 10 years. Because the cost of housing is just going to keep going up, right? There's no guarantee, even if rates are lower than what they're currently at, the cost of housing is just going to keep going up, especially if you want to live in any urban center area, right? So unless you're getting ready to try to maybe buy homes in Gary, Indiana, or maybe, I don't know, Camden, it's going to be very difficult to get a house in an urban area, a desired urban area that's desirable, and not think that you're going to pay way more in 10 years than currently pay right now today. So if you have the capital, and this is how this person is thinking, the best thing to do may be lock the home price in now. Even if I pass away and it's not paid for, the children can just walk into it and they'll get a lower rate and a lower cost than what they'll get if they go out and try to get a house in 10 years. So this is how they're thinking, right? These young kids also have a trust that they're going to get when they're 26 years old. So this is very diligent planning from the family. And I know these people, I know how they think, right? So they sat back and planned, okay? So here's the first question. If you are a person and you're a parent and you're not doing this kind of thinking around your child, how does your child compete with these children? And these aren't some white kids from, upstate New York or from old New York money. These are some working class Black children. But what the parents did is they used their education and their training to think their way through the situation, right? They did planning. They just didn't do, we just got some kids and, we just going to buy them a bunch of consumer items and then hope for the best, in their adult life. They sat back and planned. And then the blessings to the children is the children followed the plan. Because often children may not follow their parents' plan for whatever reason. So the children followed the plan the parents gave them. If you're a parent, how do you compete with these type of families? How is it? So the children already got a trust that they're going to get when they're 26. The parents already have one property that they're getting ready to pay off. They're now looking to acquire two more properties. So these children, when the parents passed away, are going to have this massive nest egg of capital. They're going to have their educations because they're in school right now getting educated. They have their networks from the part of the country that they're from. So they have a situation that's been established for them that their parents helped them get. So if your children are not in these type of positions, how do they compete? Let me give you another scenario. I was speaking to somebody last week about home ownership. This person works in the industry, and they were telling me that the Generation Z children, their parents are buying the home for them and just giving them the house. So they were telling me that once these rates go down, which they will, the older generations, not really the Generation Zs, but really a lot of the boomers, maybe some older Generation Zs that have what you want to call, some of the older Generation Xs that have Generation Z children, I apologize. They're going to come into the market and they're going to buy up a lot of these properties, and then they're going to give the properties to these Generation, what do they call now? Z children. So then you're going to have a segment of Generation Z children that are going to come into this market all by themselves, and they're going to have to fight this capital to get properties, right? How do you compete against that? And so this is what I've been telling you for years, is that the country essentially gave a lot of people a false reality, right? Where you can do everything by yourself, and it will help you do it by yourself. The problem is that that era is over. And the government is not telling people that era is over, and it has not created programs to deal with this new era that we're in. And what we're seeing in this new era is you now more than ever, you need a group of people to get done what you're trying to get done. This idea that I can be by myself and there's a government program to help make me economically stable, they're not really doing that. And that doesn't necessarily work the way it worked 10, 15, 20 years ago. Right? And so it's also things a lot more expensive than what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, but people's pay necessarily hasn't gone up. So there was a time to where you can get a home in an urban area for $150,000 to $200,000, right? In an urban area, like I'm talking about a larger city. Those days are over with. So you can get a house way outside of the city for $100,000. Those days are over with. So we're in an area where cost of everything has gone up. Things are a lot more competitive. You necessarily don't have programs that have really dealt and evolved to deal with this particular issue. And you have groups of people saying, we're going to pool our capital and put our capital in a position to make sure the people after us have something. And you got people that don't have those situations. How will they compete with that? So you're not going to be competitive. So when you go into the home market, you may not be competitive where you want to be, because why? You're going to have capital already in there. And what they're going to do is buy the home and just give it to their children and give it to their grandchildren. They don't even want to live in a house, but they're going to ensure that their grandchildren or children have a property. And that's what you're going to be competing with. And so this is what I'm trying to get you to really understand is that, are you focused on what it's going to take so the people that are here when you're gone have the ability to be competitive? So you're thinking about that right now, right? And so it really benefits the what we call the power elite to have all these people in this environment not thinking about these things. And we're going to kind of go into that, right? So those are two scenarios I want to talk to you about being competitive, because a lot of people were very much upset. A lot of millennials, and I don't really like to break things down by generations, but this is how people understand these things. I don't really like the generational breakdowns because they're really marketing classifications. I don't think people really realize that. But a lot of the millennials were very upset when they came into the home market 2021, 2022, and they were getting overbid on houses. And the reason why they were getting overbid on houses is because people had pooled big pools of capital together. So once the rates went down, they flooded in the market with capital. So you as just an individual person, it was going to be very difficult for you to get the house that you wanted. You may have to move way farther out. You may have to move into a smaller city. But many people now, because of the era that we're in, they want to live in these large urban areas, but they really don't understand the price point that you're going to have to pay. So the question you want to ask yourself is, how will your family compete with these groups of people? These groups of people that are thinking about, how can I make sure that my children are in the best position to be successful? And I'm setting things up for them to be successful. It's not just they're getting a college degree, because most people, their family doesn't pay for their school. They get their school financed, right? Most people, their family doesn't say, well, you know what? Here's the school, here's the educational track that you need to be on to get scholarships. Most people just try to figure out how to get their kid through high school and tell them, hey, just go finance your college, right? So we're seeing that the world that we're living in is getting more competitive than just you got a college degree, right? It's getting a lot more competitive than that. How do you compete with these groups of people? And these aren't wealthy people. These are working class people that work 9 to 5s, but they're figuring out how can they set their children up to be competitive in the future, right? So their children don't have to go through certain things. And what you're thinking about is not that. So your children are going to have to go through the exact same thing you went through. So they're not going to be competitive with a child that's going to get a trust when they're 26, and they're going to inherit one full property and another property individually, on top of the fact that they got a good education. So they're going to step into their 30s and 40s with large amounts of capital on their behalf, on top of their networks and on top of their education. How does the members of your group compete with these type of people? So if these are working class people that are doing that, what do you think the wealthy and the super wealthy are doing? Right? Because these are just regular 9 to 5 working people that are doing that. They go to work every day. So what do you think the really, really successfully, economically successfully well-off people are doing for their children? So these are kind of questions you want to kind of ask yourself, right? Here's something that I believe. Your opponent's job is to make sure you're not competitive, right? We talked about before. If you never show up at the arena, I already won. So my goal is to make sure you never show up. And so the reason why they want to do that is because it creates more room for the members of their group or the individuals that they want to be with them. Okay. I want to make sure that you're not going to be competitive, right? I don't want to compete against you because it's an opportunity that I could lose. So what I want to do is undermine your ability to be competitive before you ever start. So what can I do to make sure that that takes place so you just never show up, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't get because they're caught up in this stuff, right? So let me give an example. When I was a kid, I went to like a quote unquote integrated school, but it really wasn't integrated. It really was majority white. And so what my parents taught me is that if the teachers say, we need to speak to you, right? You got to make sure as a parent of a black child is that you show up. Because once you don't show up, their attitude is that nobody cares about this child and they're going to wash that child up, right? They're going to wash that child up because education is a resource in our environment. And they know down the road, you now have the ability to get into certain slots because of your education. So they start figuring this stuff out on the front end while the kid is a child. Does this kid have representation? Does this kid have family that's looking out for the kid? Because if they don't, it's very likely your kid's going to get lost in the sauce. They're going to wash your kid up because they understand as this kid gets older and older and older, there's only a certain amount of educational opportunities at higher level situations that this kid can be involved in. There's only a certain amount of gifted slots. There's only a certain amount of enrichment slots available to children. So we can already get this person off track early. We don't have to worry about them later on. So they're never going to be competitive because they're never going to be in the environment. This is how this thing works. So my parents taught me anytime these people say something about you, we have to show up at their school to let them know that we're involved. I got two aunts that were teachers. They talked to me all the time about how they would call the parent about the child and the parents wouldn't care. And so what they're communicating to these people is that we don't care about our child. So they don't care about your child either, right? Because educational opportunities are a resource and you got to understand that. So you got to realize is that it now creates more room for the members of their group or the individuals that they want to be with them because you're out of the way. And we talk about the prison, the school to prison pipeline, things of that nature. But we talked about how children are getting washed up at a very early age, right, by the educational institution, you know? And so I think that's something that people don't realize. They're making sure that you're not going to be competitive. You're never going, they ain't got to worry about you in high school or in college because they're going to get rid of you early. And that's something that you really want to understand. And it creates more room for them. See, it used to be they could keep you out of these situations because of the color of your skin. They can't do that anymore. So they got to figure out another way to get you out. So when you're looking at this pyramid, right, people think all the rooms at the bottom. The room's not at the bottom. The problem is everybody's at the bottom. So there's very little room there. Where's all the room at? The room's at the top. Well, why is all the room at the top? It's because nobody's at the top. So I don't think people really realize that. The room's not at the bottom. The room's not at the base. All the room is at the top because nobody's there. So if I'm in control of an environment, my goal is to make sure that nobody really gets to the top except the people I want to get there. And then when we get there, all the rooms up there, right? What I want is everybody to stay at the bottom and just get more and more and more and more crowded, right? Then the middle gets more and more and more crowded. But it's very difficult to get to the top because we're controlling that access to the top. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're trying to figure out how to make sure that you're not competitive. And it doesn't have to necessarily be overt. We're in a system now where a lot of these things are very, very, very subtle in which they do it. And a lot of times people don't see it. So one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways to make you less competitive is to destabilize you, right? All I need to do is make sure that you're not competitive is to destabilize you. So if I can destabilize your situation, you're going to be so busy dealing with that situation, you don't have the time to get stable to work on being competitive. And we're going to kind of talk about some of the areas in which you get destabilized. But I want you to understand something. we're kind of past the stages of outright attacks. Well, that's what we dealt with in the past, where we were getting outright attacked. We're past that stage because this system gets more and more sophisticated over time, right? So we're low-key past the stage of just being attacked outright. We're in a stage where we're going to just look to destabilize you so you never get the strength to mount an attack against your opponent. So if you're constantly being destabilized, you can never produce the people that are going to be strong enough to mount an attack against your opponent, because why? You're constantly being destabilized, so you're constantly having to work on that. And then if you don't know you're being destabilized, you're participating in the destabilization effort that is really hurting your group, and you're not even aware of it. If you go way back to the day when Anglos started coming to this particular part of the world, but especially in the Northeast, one of the things that really destabilized the natives was smallpox. It wasn't really the conflict, right? It wasn't the warfare. It really was a smallpox. And they used the smallpox as a destabilizer because you had whole groups that would lose large amounts of their population to illness, so they could never mount an attack, right? Because of the smallpox. So really, if you really study, the smallpox killed more natives than the warfare. But they used the smallpox as a destabilizer because the natives had no immunity to it. So they realized really early on, it doesn't really make sense for us to get in direct conflict with these people. We can utilize these things to destabilize them, and they'll spend so much time trying to manage that situation. We can continue to build our strength in the background. Okay. So that's what I want you to understand. So we look at your education. How does what you're learning allow you to be competitive and win? Right? When you're looking at your education, what you're being educated to do, how does what you're learning allow you to be competitive and win? How does it? Right? What does your education really allow you to do in this particular environment? Because many people don't really understand the goal of education. So what is your education really allowing you to do? Is it allowing you to be competitive and win? Entertainment. You get dumber and the entertainer benefits. So in my opinion, there's no difference between Sexy Red and members of the Daily Wire. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm saying that the entertainer benefits and you get dumber. If you look at a lot of Joe Rogan's early podcasts, it was primarily about using drugs, right? So what I want you to understand is that when you're looking at these entertainers, are you getting dumber and the entertainer benefits? Is the entertainer getting compensated to just make sure that you're dumb? Right? No disrespect to nobody and what they do, because they see the opportunity. If you look at Sexy Red 5 years ago, her act was totally different. It clicked in her head that, you know what? People just want low tier stuff. That's just what they want. So you know what she did? She gave it to him and she blew up. Now she was acceptable to get promoted. But if you look at her 5 years ago, her act was totally different. Right? And so this is what you always want to kind of ask yourself when you're just elevating these entertainers. What is your benefit outside of just the entertainment? Because many of these people have been selected by society, in my opinion, to make sure that the masses stay dumb. It doesn't matter what lane they're in. Right? They're all under the same structure. Okay. And so when you're looking at your entertainment, how is your entertainment allowing you to become more competitive? And I'm not saying that entertainment has no value. I'm not one of those people. I watch movies all the time. But what I'm saying is that, what are you getting from the entertainment? What value or benefit from you getting? Or is it just making sure that you're less competitive and you're in no position to be a winner? If you look at stuff like TikTok, what is TikTok really doing to people? It's a great entertainment platform, but what is it really doing to people, especially long-term? What is going to be the long-term impact of somebody that spends 20 years on TikTok? Right? But it's a great entertainment vehicle, but what is it really doing to people? Right? Next thing, socialization. Have you been socialized to believe you should be competitive and beat the brakes off your opponents? Right? This is the question a lot of people really need to ask themselves. Have you been socialized to believe that, one, you should be competitive, and one, you should beat the brakes off your opponents? Right? Have you just been socialized to believe that you should just be here, or you should be under the radar and not make any waves? Well, why do you have to do that then? Right? Why is people so uncomfortable if you're successful? Why are people so uncomfortable if you win? Which makes you uncomfortable, so you decide not to do it. So we got to really start asking ourselves is that why are you been socialized to believe that you should not be competitive and you shouldn't get W's? And I'm talking about outside of sports and entertainment, right? I'm talking about outside of sports and entertainment. How come you have not been socialized that you should be competitive and you should beat people in these other areas, right? Not just participate, you should be beating them. Because I thought we was doing competition. So I thought the goal was to beat people. I didn't think the goal was just to be here. So that's what I want you to understand something. So here's the areas in which like you can be destabilized. And that's not all of it, but just cover some other points. Food, water, shelter, health, politics, and drugs, right? So we know some of the things that are being done in food. We've talked about some of the things that have been done in water. We know some of the things that are being done around shelter. We know some of the things that are being done around health. We definitely know some of the things that are being done around politics. We talk about drugs, and I just don't mean street drugs. I mean alcohol and cigarettes also, right? In these particular areas, where are you being destabilized in, right? And so these are some of the things that you need to look at. If I can put you in an area and you don't have access to good food sources, that can be a destabilizer to you. We talked about, though, Flint, Michigan, right? So people that may know this may understand that when you're a young person and you come in contact with lead, what it does is it hinders or inhibits, or I don't know what the proper term is, but it kind of stagnates your brain development, right? So lead is very detrimental to young people. When those young people in Flint, Michigan that got exposed to that lead contaminated water, when they get 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, right? And they can't function in normal society because of what happened to them as children, what has happened? We've destabilized their family. But we really did it when they was kids. We're just now starting to see the impact of that now. The people that did that, they knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't do that by mistake, right? When they moved that water source from one water source to another water source, they knew exactly what they were doing. So what they've done is we've destabilized this particular environment. So then they can't be opposition to our group, because why? Their youth are going to be in no position to be opposition to our group. Their youth are going to be in no position to be competitive, because why? We've inhibited or hindered their brain development on top of everything else they got going on in their life, right? Same thing with shelter. If you can't get shelter, if you can't get an environment that's relatively safe where you can raise your children and function, it's destabilizing you. Right? Same thing with health. We got whole areas of the city of Atlanta, they don't have a healthcare footprint. Right? Pretty much the whole South Side, they don't have a healthcare footprint. You go down there, you don't see urgent cares, you don't see walk-ins. There's no real healthcare footprint. Right? So if you have a health issue in those areas, you have a long way to travel to get to a healthcare provider. So we can destabilize you because your health's not up to par. So you got bad food, you got bad water, and then you don't have healthcare. Politics. How do we destabilize you politically? Do the people that are in position to you politically, do they really represent your best interests? Right? Or they represent the interests of another group of people, but acting like they're representing you? Then we got the drugs. If a bunch of people control an environment, right? How do drugs get into the environment? And I'm not excusing anybody's individual behavior. But if I'm controlling an environment, how do drugs get into the environment? Right? So we've seen this go on for a very long period of time, where you have areas in which the people that live in the area have very little to no control. They have no power, but the area is full of drugs. Where do drugs come from? So these are ways in which you can be destabilized in these particular areas. You're never going to be competitive because you're constantly being so destabilized. You can never get yourself solid enough to mount any opposition to your enemies. Okay, let's keep going. So we talked about how all these attachments help you become more competitive and win in the environment, or they're destabilizing you and your group. So are these attachments helping you win or destabilizing you? Because I don't ever have to go directly to war with you if I just stabilize you around these particular elements. And I didn't add education in there, even though we talked about this, right? So if I control all of these elements in your environment, I also control your entertainment, I also control your education, and I just destabilize you through these particular elements, you're never going to be competitive. And I don't ever have to worry about fighting you because you're never going to be able to put up a fight. You're going to be so busy worrying about these situations and how do you compensate for lack in these particular areas, you'll never be able to muster enough people to put up a fight, right? That's just really how this game is being played. So the goal of your opponent is to play and is to make sure that your group never creates enough real opposition to what they want to do, right? We're kind of past that stage of where they need to do something overt to you, okay? They just have to figure out how to make sure that your group can never create enough real opposition to what we want to do. So we just stabilize you on these particular areas, right? And then you worry about that so much, you can never go create no real opposition. So we talked about they just stabilize your group on multiple levels. Eventually, this destabilization becomes normal and losing becomes normal. We have a large amount of people in our population, they don't expect to win. So losing is normal. In fact, they expect to lose. So you can't put them in a situation in which they're going to win because they don't expect to win. They expect to lose. So they only really understand situations in which they're going to take a loss. Okay. And so that's what you really want to understand is that so many people at this point, losing is normal. So the only people that are winning are the people that figure out how to promote losing for their own individual and maybe their small little family success, right? But they're promoting more losing, right, to the people that are being destabilized. So no disrespect to Sexy Red, but I don't see her as winning, right? She's a 3-time single mother who has a lot of other issues. I don't care how much money she makes in music. I don't see her as winning, right? But she is being promoted as an avatar to literally thousands, if not millions of people. And so you got this in all areas of life to where these people are helping to stabilize large amounts of people. They get their individual success because it's designed to make sure that losing becomes normal. Okay. So what I want to really encourage you to do is define what winning is to you. Because I think a lot of people haven't made this definition. So winning to you may be that you get married, you have a child, you get a house in the suburbs, and you coach like Little League football or baseball. That may be what winning is to you. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's your definition of winning. But I want to really encourage you is define what winning is to you. Stop letting other people tell you what the win is. Because I don't think a lot of people have really sat down and say, what do I think winning is in my life? And this is why we talked about every 2 to 3 years, or really every year on the internet, people are redefining what they said winning was. Now, last year was this. Now you're saying it's this. And the next year, you're going to say it's this. Because they haven't really sat down and defined what winning is to them. Either they don't have the confidence, they don't have the intellectual capability, or they just haven't done the work. What is winning to you? Winning may be that you work remote and you travel the world. That may be what winning is to you. And I don't mean that you're tricking all over the world. I mean is that you're traveling, right? There was a woman I was watching a YouTube video. She left her job in America. She was living in Mexico City. She liked it. She said, I make less money, but my bills are a lot lower. She was actually enjoying herself. That's what winning is to her. Okay. What is winning to you? And many people can't really when you start asking them that, they got to draw on what somebody else told them that winning was. And ask yourself the question, have I defined winning in a way in which I don't win, but somebody else wins, the person that defined it for me? They win, but I don't really win. Okay. The next question you want to kind of ask yourself is, the next thing you want to do is focus on what makes you and your group competitive and allows them to win. So based on what you said winning is, how can you focus on that so you and your group can become competitive and allows them to do that? Right? So once you decide what it is, how do you focus on it and go get that? And then get to W and what you said that is. Right? And so that's what I want you to really understand. Can you define it? And then how are you going to focus on it to go get it? Many people can't do the first part, so then they can't do the second part. So what do? They spend their whole life getting distracted and being destabilized because they never decided what a win is. We need to start asking young people, why do you think you need to go to school? To college, I mean. Why do you need to go? We're not saying don't go, but why do you think you need to go? Because many people just think they need to go to college because why? That's what everybody else is doing. But you have other options outside of going to school. So why do you think you need to do that? Right? So we don't often ask our young people, why do they think they need to do it? Because we're often caught up in the same thing that they're caught up in. We're allowing other people to dictate what this situation should be. And we don't realize that we're participating in a big destabilization effort to make sure that we're not going to be competitive. So when you look back at your life, accept that you are where you are or where you decided the win was. So once you decide what winning is, once you decide that what you're going to focus on, then look back at your life and say, okay, you know what? I'm where I decided the W was at. Because one of the things that I'm not a fan of, and it's just me personally, is that if you made all the decisions in your life, don't get to where you decided you wanted to go and then turn around and blame everybody else. There's also that believing that that is a correct thing to do is also part of you being destabilized, right? If you said, I'm going to make all the decisions, I'm going to do what I want to do or what you believe you want to do, and then you look up and you're not where you want to be, you need to ask yourself why you made those decisions. But again, you can make a lot of money in this environment by giving people a platform to blame other people for the decisions that they made in their life. And if you can build a big platform doing that, you can make a lot of money, but those people never really understand that they're where they're at because of their best thinking. Because you can't make money by telling them that. You can just make money by giving them a platform to complain about how their decisions got them to where they're at. So I really want to encourage you to determine what you think a W is. Then how can I focus on that to make sure that me and my group are going to be competitive and we can go get that W? So when you look back at your life, you can say, you know what? I'm where I'm at because this is where I decided I wanted to be, not because of what somebody else did to me. Or you can be willing to say, I didn't do what it took to get to W, so I just settled. So either you can look back at your life and say, hey, you know what? I'm where I'm at because I decided this is where the W's at. Or you can look back at your life and say, you know what? I'm not where I want to be because I settled in my life. And I don't mean this colloquialism that I settled. No, you settled because I didn't want to do what it was going to take to go get the W. Right? Because it may take sacrifice. It may take that you're not able to participate in certain things. Whatever it's going to take, are you willing to make that sacrifice? Okay? Or you can just continue to allow these people to destabilize you, which is not going to be an issue because, again, we talked about there's so many people at the bottom of this pyramid that you're not going to be by yourself, right? You start running out of people as you start getting closer to the top. Down here is where everybody's at. So if you just continue to allow what's always been going on, just stay consistent in your life, you're going to have a lot of company. And then the people at the top, they're going to promote entertainers to come down and entertain you to make you feel good being down here, to make you have to overlook, well, I lack this, I lack this, I lack this, but it doesn't matter because I feel good being down here because I'm being entertained while I'm down here, right? That's what their job is, to entertain you while you're down there. Then it allows them to get a little bit closer to the middle or a little bit closer to the top. They're never going to get up here because they're never going to be in positions of power. But that's how the system is set up. So that's what I want you to really understand. Many of you are not competitive. It doesn't bother me, right? Because it means that you're not going to be able to compete with my group. Okay, I accepted a long time ago that there's zero-sum games in this world. Okay, and it's not that I'm doing anything to stop you from being competitive. Is that you haven't decided that you really want to be competitive and you want to get the W. You haven't decided that. And you haven't decided that you're going to make the sacrifices of whatever it's going to take to get that. And you haven't decided that the people that are going to be here are so important that I need to do what I need to do to make sure that they don't go through the same things I went through. That's really not that important to you. And I'm not here to tell you that it should be important to you. You should better determine what's worked best for you and your group. So appreciate everybody for coming through. We're going to read through the comments and then we're going to get up on out of here. So super chat, Ray Gun, man, I appreciate the $2 super chat. Cedric Wade, I appreciate the $5 super chat. Tor Helms, I appreciate the $20. Really appreciate it. Miss Phoenix 91, appreciate the $5 super chat. JR, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. David's here to help. Appreciate the $4.99. Gary and it's going up. I bought a home for $40K turnkey in 2018. Now homes are selling for $150 to $200K in the same area. That's 100% correct. But Mr. Dave here's the help. That's cheap compared to the rest of the country, right? So that's still cheap. That's still relatively cheap for Gary. That's good for Gary. It went up. Big up to you for your appreciation, right? Big up to you. But compared to the rest of the country, that's relatively cheap. In the Atlanta metro area, a $200,000 house is going to be pretty much a tear down, or you got to go in there and remodel everything. Like they done burnt the walls, the kitchen been ripped up, they done ripped up the floors, like everything. Right? And that'll be at maybe 250, maybe 250, right? Anything that's halfway decent is upper 200s, maybe mid 300s. And that's like a 3-bed, 1-bath. So you're going to have to add a bath later on. But big up to you for your appreciation. So Girls with Pearls say the taxes happen right on our nose. There's no secret day, most definitely. And JLD, man, I appreciate the $10 super chat. What's up with GC? Mr. Gullery, what's going on with it, man? What's going on to Erica, Classic Client Smartphone Money? So Erica got some events she rolling out. I'm going to be at the Atlanta event in May. I want to really encourage y'all, man, to make sure y'all hit one of those events before she do her disappearing act, right? So she's rolling her events out. I'm going to be at the Atlanta event in May. I'm going to that. So Campbell Fitness says America's not set up for single people, and it's obvious. I would say it's not set up for single people that are not high income earners, right? It's just really not. To be single to me now in this environment, you got making a lot more money than the average person. And for a very long time, cost was so low, you could just be an average single person and get away with it. It's just going to be very difficult to do that now in the future, in my opinion. So Erica Williams, Classic Climb Smartphone Money says, my friends' parents are picking up 45 to 80K homes in military towns, so their sons wouldn't live with them in their 20s. Those homes are valued at 100K to 120K now. Definitely. That's what people are doing. And the kid is walking right into a house. You know, and then now he's able to get in early. House going to still appreciate. So that's an advantage, right? It just is. And he going to get him another house. So Erica says, 2 male teachers plus my parents pushed me to all AP class since 10th grade. These schools don't care unless you push. Most definitely. They don't. A lot of these teachers are milking the clock till they retire. I mean, it just is what it is, even at good schools. A lot of these teachers, man, are burnt out. Some of them don't care. It is what it is. And parents got to be very proactive, in my opinion, of making sure their kids get a good education, regardless of the school they send their child to, even if they send their kid to private school. They have to be very proactive because educational opportunities are limited. A lot of people that go into the medical space, they realize that the top residencies are limited. So everybody's not going to get them. And it's those top residencies that allow you to get the top tier jobs. So you got to go in knowing this is what I want to do, and I got to go compete for it, whether it's go grades, extra time, whatever you got to do. Same thing with people I know that was in the PhD program trying to get research dollars. Research dollars are limited. So you got to be willing to do what it's going to take to go get them. And some schools are known for being research schools. So GC says, I went to go read to some kids in third grade. I went to go read to some kids in third grade, and the majority of them couldn't even pronounce words like that or into. Yeah, that's unfortunate. And the parents got to ask themselves why they can't do that also. What's going on, Miss Jill? So Tori says, I never had TikTok. I had it for maybe a week and just realized, yeah, it's just really not me. You know, that what they were serving to me just really wasn't my flavor. But, you know, it just wasn't for me. I know an Indian woman said they banned it in India. So Ray Gun says, exactly, Sexy Red was just rapping about guns and drugs. Nobody paid attention. Yeah, she changed her whole style up. You know, she got old stuff on YouTube if you go search for it. She really wasn't getting no traction. She figured out, same way Rick Ross figured it out. Rick Ross rapped for years and couldn't get no traction. And then when he came with the drug kingpin persona, that just blew up. And it just blew up really, really big. But he had been rapping for years before he blew up. Like Rick Ross didn't blow up. He was like in his early 30s. He had been rapping for years. It's just they hang around long enough. They realize like people really want like low level stuff. They don't want higher level stuff. Not at the scale. That's not the scale. So they just really realize like, I just got to come very lowbrow. And that's how I'm going to blow up. And it is what it is. So Erica says, look how easy it was to send kids home and put illegals in that school in New York. Know that community got enough push. Definitely. Yeah. And I just think the communities, Erica, they're not used to that type of stuff. Like, I mean, what I mean is that they're not used to advocating for their own interest. Same way with the people in Chicago. Like, there's no way they should have been able to do that from the gate. But when people are so destabilized, they don't even know to advocate for their own interests, because if they knew how to advocate for their own interests, they wouldn't be destabilized. So they can just pull that off on people. And then you can go to a town home. Not talking about you personally, but I'm saying is that they can go to a town home and everybody can scream and complain, but they're going to do it anyway. And I think that's just very unfortunate. But it's because they had already been so destabilized for so long, they just can run over them like that. And I just think that's very, very, very unfortunate. You know, but it is what it is. You know, them people got to stand up for themselves and in their community. Because the politicians, they don't care. You know, the mayor of Chicago, he don't let it be known. He gonna let them people in there. He gonna give them everything they want. Because he trying to move up in the party. So he got to play ball. So to me, it says winning is doing what I want to do. Okay, so what do you want to do? What is that? Chowtown says some of these people depend on the school to teach them everything, no accountability for their children's education. Definitely. But I think a lot of the parents are so in such a bad shape and they often don't know. You know, so I wouldn't expect a child to learn how to read from parents that don't know how to read. And we got a lot of people that don't know how to read. You know, they've done studies to show that like half of America got a 6th grade or lower reading level. So that's the problems. I think that we've institutionalized people just getting by from an educational standpoint. So they don't necessarily have the ability to teach the children what they know what to do. So then it replicates itself in the community. Nobody knows like this stuff. They don't know it. So they can't teach it to the child. If they don't know it, you know, they don't have the ability. And some people don't know what they don't know, you know. But if you ask the average person, in my opinion, I don't know because I haven't done a study, to divide fractions with different denominators, I don't think they would know off the top of their head how to do it. And we know that a lot of people's reading ability is not really at a high level. So I just don't think they have a lot to teach children. I don't. And it's different between when my grandmother was growing up, where they didn't go to school because they had to work. What we have is a lot of people to where I just think they just decided, you know what, this is just not for me. The problem is that your child is going to pay the price of that. But it is what it is. You know, I've always said that on the road, they need to find a different way to communicate to people, because, you know, everything on the road is in words. Well, people can't read. So that's why you be on the highway, man, and people be trying to hit exits like they're crazy, because I don't think they even realize till it's too late that that's the exit, because they couldn't read it. They tell you 6 miles out that you're getting ready to come into the exit, but people can't read, so they don't even realize they go into the exit. That's why I think the highway is so dangerous, because everything's in print and people can't read. Because in Atlanta, they'll tell you where the accident is at. They'll tell you where they're doing construction, but you got to be able to read. Most people can't read. They can't. It's just very, very unfortunate. So LJ says, my house is almost paid for. It's worth under $500K. This house is going to my child after they graduate from college. So big up to LJ. So Michael Merriweather says black people in Chicago voted for Brandon because he was black. They didn't read what he stood for. We just talked about people don't read. So I don't think they would read in any situation if they don't. If you're already not a reader, you're not going to read in any scenario. So I don't think it's just Brandon. They're already not reading. Most people don't read, in my opinion. Mr. O'Shea, man, appreciate the 1999 super chat. Tori says, I'm not good at math, but I'm an excellent reader. Yeah, I'm the same, but I had to learn how to get good at math because of my major. But I prefer to read than do math. But that's just me. Ori, man, appreciate the $5. Miss Katrina, man, what's going on with you? What's up in Texas? So Tia says, I offered to tutor parents and gave resource lists, but the I don't do math parents do nothing. Yeah, Miss T, I just don't think they know it. So they're not comfortable. And I don't think they want the child to know that they don't know it. You know, we really need to, if we can, do a study on how many people in America are functionally illiterate, right? And how many people in America have 6th grade or lower math skills. You know, but the country created an environment to where you could get by with those deficiencies because they don't care. It makes you less competitive. But the problem is they don't have the ability to educate their children to make sure the children is on point because they don't know it. And a lot of times I just think the parents don't know it themselves. I just really think that's what it is. GC says, I open your eyes when people driving on the highway can't read. Yeah, they can't read. And on top of that, they're distracted by their phone. So before the phones, it was they just couldn't read. Now it's they can't read and they on their phone. So it's just rough. That's why I got to be careful on these highways. But in Atlanta, they notify you of everything with a screen. It's really like dope where they do it because other cities like Orlando don't really do it that way. Orlando does it a little bit. But in Atlanta, they tell you everything that's going on in the road above you on the screen. So all you got to do is read the screen. But if you can't read, you ain't going to see it. You driving 60 miles an hour, you got to be able to read it fast. People don't have that ability. You know what I'm saying? So they don't know that there's an accident up there. They're doing construction. This lane is closed. The express lane is closed. They tell you everything on the screen. Then you see your exits. They tell you as you're getting ready to go into your exit. It's just people can't read. They got to try to figure out another way to get that attention to people. I don't know how you do it because it's in print. So Tia says they don't want the kids to know, but after a while they know. Yeah, they know, but I often don't think that the kids are going to get too much farther than their parents. You know, we are telling the, and I'm talking about you personally, but these stories of these kids being raised in these really bad situations, like the Ben Carson story, he's an exception to the rule. A lot of these kids are never going to get past their parents because of the fact that they're being destabilized in all these different areas, one of them being educationally. But America keeps telling this Ben Carson story about this poor black kid in the ghetto, and he was able to rise above his poverty. But the problem is that that's not going to be the masses of people in those situations. We were talking about this last week. APS does not have a good public school system. So we're shuttling all these children through the school system, and they're not getting an education that's going to allow them to be competitive. They're just getting an education to allow the state to say, we did the minimum to educate these kids and to send them out into the world. But it's not an education that's going to allow these children to be competitive in the world that we're currently going in right now. You know, that's something that Dr. Dix talks about a lot. He's 100% correct. Something that Erica's talked about a lot. She's 100% correct. This world is going to be a lot more competitive. You know, there was a time in which if you just could get through high school in America, you was good. The days is over with. They never coming back. Right? Those jobs are over with and them days is over with. As far as you making a decent salary, you got to kind of have a little bit more on the ball. But to me, it starts at a younger level, building that foundation. And for a lot of young people, the foundation is never getting built. I'm really like, I live in Atlanta, right? You can go through this city, and I'm not trying to disrespect people because of their accent, because I got a Southern accent. But there's areas of this city where you talk to some of these young people, and the average person wouldn't know what the hell they were saying. It's almost like they're speaking in patois. And they're not doing it, this quote unquote code switching. That's not what they're doing. Is they can't sit down and speak American standard. There's no wrong with talking slang. I talk slang. So, you know, if I'm in a situation about a bunch of people that really know me, everything that come out of my mouth gonna be slang, right? Then on top of that, I got a Southern accent. But if you take me to a job interview, I know how to sit down and talk American standard. We got whole populations in this city of young children because of their environment and the way in which they have not been educated. When you try to talk to them, it makes little to no sense to the average person that's not used to hearing, one, the dialect, and then two, the slang. It's almost like they're speaking a patois or a Creole. And that's cool, but it's not going to work in mainstream society when you go to try to get a job. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with, is that they're not going to be competitive because of that. Because you can't put them in a job interview. They just don't have the ability to communicate their value to that employer or prospective employer at that moment. It is what it is. So the state of Georgia is going to just give them kids a minimal education because they know they're going to see them again in the prison system, right? And then we also can utilize them to justify our government programs, because many of the girls are going to end up on some type of program, so we can use them to justify our programs to maintain the bureaucracy. It's a game they're playing with people's lives, but it is what it is. So JLD says, when I applied to police academy, 7 people failed the reading test. The department is so short on bodies, they allowed them to retake the test until they pass. That's crazy. I wish you could tell us what year that was. Yeah, I was taking a course called Issues in Sports when I was in college at USF. So Leroy Selman, rest in peace, was doing one of the modules in the course. And he talked about how he was in college and he was playing football for, I think, Oklahoma, and how they was in the defensive meeting room. And he said that the majority of guys that played on the D line couldn't read, but they in college, right? So they let those guys into that college and these guys couldn't read. And he talked about that. So again, I just think America has a big functional illiterate issue that they don't want to address. And it just, it may not be profitable to address it and make sure that the majority of people are not going to be competitive. But we got a lot of people running around this country that are functionally illiterate. They can get by, but it impacts their life negatively because they can't read. So Katrina says it gets worse with children not having age-level language skills. Yeah, we was talking about that. It's real rough down here. And it's not a good look for the city. But it is what it is. They don't want to. Well, I don't think they have the ability to, because they're not driving the tax revenue. So the children are taking the fall. But it's going to be very difficult for them to go into other environments with that impairment on their language, right? But it is what it is. So Ray Gun says, talking to my 20-year-old coworker this week, and she told me she didn't know her basic multiplication tables. Yeah, that's unfortunate. She got to get on top of that, at least to her 10s. You might not know the 11s and the 12s, but you got to at least get to the 10s, right? You at least got to get to the 10s, huh? But that's very unfortunate. Katrina said you got to start with the parents at birth. I feel you. Chomtown says, I moved here 10 years ago. So Chomtown, where did you move from? Because if you move from somewhere else, I can see where it could throw you off, right? So where did you move from? But it could be the same thing if you go to Jamaica, or if you go to Haiti, if you go to any Caribbean island. And I think a lot of Americans don't understand that the country is so big, you're going to have dialects, right? Because people from New Orleans don't sound like people from Florida, and people from Florida don't sound like people from B-More. So we have regional dialects in this country. So I think a lot of times when people encounter the regional dialect, it throws them off, because for some reason people think in America language should be flat across the country. This landmass is too big for that to actually be the case. Because you hear If you go across like Latin America, their Espanol don't all sound the same because of how big the region is. So we start in Mexico and go all the way south down to what we call Chile. Everybody does not even pronounce their Spanish or their Espanol the same, right? Argentinians are known for very grammatically correct Espanol. If you go to like Puerto Rico, they're known to speak Espanol, however. They make up words, they invent words. That's just what they do. So I just think a lot of times people don't understand that there should be a regional dialect because of how large our country is. But I think most people don't realize how big America is because they haven't really been across it. I'm not talking about you, just talking about in general. I think it escapes people how big the United States actually is. Like the United States is very big, right? So if you go to New York City, they're not going to sound like people in Florida, whether they white, black, green, or purple. But I feel you though. So Miss Ty says, I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened in the military, illiterate people being allowed to serve. Yeah, a guy came on last week, Miss Ty. He said that the NCOs are having to teach people how to read, which is how do they get out of high school, right? Or even get a GED if you can't read. This is weird, but that's what's going on right now. So JLD says it was last year. So he's applied to the PD in North Carolina last year. They were younger than you in their early 20s. They had to spoon feed them answering the academic. That's going to be rough. Yeah, that's unfortunate, especially when they get on the street. But it is what it is. They got to work who they got. They got to work with who they got to work with. You know, it is what it is. That's very unfortunate. I don't know how, like I said, how they getting out of high school or even getting a GED if their reading level is that low. But it is what it is. I would hate to see their math level. So Ray Gunn says the city of Atlanta has a $169 billion budget. Is that the budget for schools or the overall budget? Right? Because Mr. Ray Gunn, one of the issues that Atlanta's having is that the poverty actually inside the city, it is impacting the ability to fund the school systems. Now, like I said, I don't know where the money going, but is that for the schools or that overall? But we know schools are funded by tax revenue from homes. We've just now had a run over the past few years where these homes inside the city have gone up, but for a very long time, nobody wanted to buy this property actually inside the city of Atlanta. So the homes have very little to no value. So they weren't able to raise the taxes to support the schools. And then the question is, what is the money being done with it? But the question is, are the parents demanding that the kids get a proper education? They often aren't because they are destabilized. So they're not going into the school board or the PTA meeting saying, well, how come my child don't know this, and the third? Right? And if you go to a lot of higher income areas, the parents have figured out how to get the stability to be involved in the child's education. So to me, it's a chain effect. You destabilize the parent, and 9 times out of 10, the child's going to get the impact of that environment just because the parent's been destabilized. So it's just very unfortunate. Then it just replicates itself. Right? So I want to know, is that 1.69 billion, is that for schools or just for the overall city? So Katrina says, I lived all over the country. I talk like an American. I feel you. But I know Anglos from your part of the country, Katrina, and they have a very pronounced accent to me. To me, I hear it. Right? So I hear it like that part of the country that you're from. I've met a lot of Anglos from that part of the country. I can hear their accent. It stands out to me. Right? So that's what I'm saying is that like this country's so big, you're going to have like regions. Like, a lot of people from Philly, their accent to me is real loud. Black people from Philadelphia, and a lot of them from the Carolinas. And their accent really, really, really stands out to me. Like I can really hear it when they talk. So Corporate Check says, I'm in Detroit, outside of charter schools, the majority of public schools are defunding and closing. Well, I mean, yeah, where's the taxes going to come from? Where's the tax money coming in to support the schools? I mean, Detroit had such big problems with tax. When they gave Bing the city, it was no revenue coming into the city. That's why they gave it to Bing. Right? So you remember that when they let Bing be the mayor, it wasn't no money coming through the city no more. What the hell he going to do? That's why they gave it to him. So I just think Detroit's biggest issue was that until they build that thing back up, they just going to always have revenue issues. You know, it's hard to run a city with no money. It's really impossible, but, you know, it is what it is. GC says, I know people who can't read still able to check more than 80K a year living in Birmingham. I feel you. What kind of jobs they doing, though? You know, what kind of jobs they doing? I may need to move to Birmingham if it's cake like that, because I can read, so I can get that 80K and do something else. All right, man. So that's pretty much going to be it for the comments. Appreciate everybody for coming through. But I want to really encourage you, man, to try to really figure out, like, what is a win to you? How do you define it? What do you need to do to go get it? And then accept that either you're going to do what it takes to go get it, or you're not, and just deal with the repercussions of your actions, right? So I hope you got some value from it. David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to y'all later, man. Make sure you stay safe.